Hello, Dr. Christian Conte. Well, Dr. Conte, welcome to the Trips and Global on Wheels podcast. I'm going to
Thank you.
start off with a short bio and then we'll continue with the interview. Does that sound good with you?
Sounds great.
Okay, do you have water and you're
Yep,
comfortable to start?
I'm all good. Yeah, thank you so
Okay,
much.
of course, of course. So, Dr. Christian Conte is a renowned anger management specialist, licensed professional counselor, and a co host of the podcast Tackling Life with NFL legend Ray Lewis. Uh, with a PhD in counselor education and over 2 decades of experience, Dr. Conte is known for his no nonsense compassion, emotional depth, and the yield theory, approach he developed to help people de escalate conflict and build self awareness. He's worked with inmates, athletes, leaders, and everyday people navigating emotional struggles. Through his books, talks, and real world interventions, he teaches practical tools for emotional mastery, deep presence, and the courage to change from the inside out. So, Dr. Conte, as you know, our platform is especially geared towards people with disabilities, mobility disabilities, especially. Is there anything you'd like to add to the bio that I just read to make a connection to this group of? It's said that there are 1 billion people living with visible or invisible disabilities around the world.
My tagline that I've spent my whole career on is that the world boils down to two kinds of people. There are people who have issues and then dead people. So if you're alive, you have issues. We all have issues. I think the idea of someone being in a space where they don't also struggle or have issues isn't real. Like we're all in this life together, and I think I've always been very passionate about that. That we're all in this life together, each of us.
That's very well said. And your TED Talks, which I've watched, are very powerful and such important messages on your YouTube channel too. I see that you have quite a following there. So to start off, by way of introduction, what first pulled you towards the emotional lives of others, and what in your own story made you stay in this type of work?
Well, I remember when I was a teenager, I asked my dad why he was an earth scientist. At the time, I didn't think that sounded exciting. So I said, "Why do you study basically rocks?" And my dad, who taught geology, and he said, "Well, if you're only going to live on one planet your entire life, don't you think you ought to get to know that planet?" And it was awesome. I loved the way he phrased it. And I loved what he said. And then when I went off to study in at college, I tried different subjects. Things weren't seeming to resonate with me. And then I thought about his advice. And then I thought about it in terms of myself. Like if I'm going to live with myself my whole life, shouldn't I get to know myself? And that's what really drew me to psychology. And that's what had me dive into my own psyche. I was also really interested in my dreams when I was young. Like I just was really fascinated by what went on inside our inner worlds. And here I am, 27 years of practicing as a professional, 27 years working with thousands of people from all over the world. And what I have found is, and this is really fascinating, that each of us, we are the only people in the history of humanity who have unrestricted access to our minds. And when you think about the depth of who each person is, it's fascinating. And yet, we're the only ones who knows exactly what's going on in our inner world. And if our worlds internally are a place of chaos, anger, depression, uh, anxiety, we're the only ones who can truly go inward and change it. And so I'm really passionate about trying to help people navigate their inner worlds. I know that each person can only go in alone, but what I think I offer and what I try to do is help guide people and help them see some of the obstacles that they're going to encounter. For example, the Divine Comedy. Dante Alighieri, he has the poet Virgil lead Dante through hell and through purgatory. And then he has Beatrice helps him guide him through heaven. But there's a guide with him. He has to do it himself. He has to travel down through these places. But there is a guide. And I really look at what I do, whether I'm working with people who are convicted of violent crimes in prisons, or whether I'm working with sports athletes, or just everyday people, we're the ones who have to go through that inner world. And what I get to do, I'm blessed when people invite me into their inner world, and I kind of just help them as a guide. That's really how I've seen myself, as a guide.
Yeah. So you're known for helping people manage their anger, their harder emotions. But what did your own early relationship with emotions look like? Were you ever afraid of your own intensity?
That's such a great question. And I would say absolutely, absolutely. I've always been a very passionate and intense person. I've always been a very intense person. I always say I'm a professional speaker. And I always tell people, I wish I was the funny speaker. I always want to be the guy who's like lighthearted. And my wife, we've been married for 25 years, and she always says, like, I have her, she's lighthearted, she's such a gift for me. But I've always been a very intense person. And when I was young, my emotions, they controlled me, versus where I am today, where I'm able to be in control of my emotions. When I was young, I remember talking to a counselor who, he basically said that people were, you could see how people were controlling me. Like if someone said something that I didn't like, I was, and whether he told me this or whether I came up with this, but essentially it's like a puppet. Like if I say to this bottle of tea, "Hey, you're a terrible bottle," and he's like, "Oh man," and I'm like, "I'm just kidding. You're a great bottle," and he's like, "Yeah, I'm happy. I'm in control of the bottle." And it sounds silly, but how many times has your day been going one way, and someone comes and along and they say or do something and throws your day off? And in those moments, that person has controlled us. And I just didn't like that feeling. I didn't want to be controlled by what other people say or do, because people were all struggling. People were in their own, lost in their own inner pain. And I didn't want to be controlled by that. So for me, it was the only course that I was willing and wanted to take was to learn about myself, to figure out what drives that inner world. And I'm just so grateful to get to be on a path of self awareness.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So, as we mentioned a couple of times, both in the bio and you yourself have shared as well in these few minutes, you work with people. Society often fears or condemns even violent offenders, angry men, public figures. What did those rooms teach you about your own ego?
Well, I really like the way you phrased that, because that's so true. It's about ego. Like so many of our issues have to do with our own ego. Our ego is the part of us that needs to be right. Our ego is the part of us that says, whatever we believe is absolutely true. If someone believes something differently, they're wrong. Um, so our ego is selfish, it's arrogant, it's self centered. But I don't believe that the ego is the center of who we are. So if you think about Freud's iceberg, he used an iceberg to describe the psyche. And if you think about an iceberg, the vast majority of the iceberg is underwater. So if we look at that iceberg and we say everything that's above the water is consciousness, it's everything that we're aware of. But the most of the iceberg is underwater or unconscious, things we're not aware of. So the ego is the center of the part of the iceberg that's above water. That's what the ego is aware of. Everything that's above water. And if when you step back and you look at a big picture of an iceberg and you see how much of it is underwater, And you look, what's the center? Well, the center of that big iceberg is way down underwater. That's the essence. That's the core of who we are. It's whether we call it the true self or the self with a capital S or essence. I call it essence sometimes, but the essence is the center of who we are. The ego is only the center of our consciousness, the center of everything we're aware of. And the reason why that's so powerful, and I want to tie this in with the people I work with, is when our ego is in control, it believes people cannot wrong me. People should not think differently from how I think. They should not act differently from how I want them to. And what I've noticed and what I've learned from the people who are in life sentences, I've worked with people on death row, and every person that has taken other people's lives because they were wronged or they perceived themselves to be wronged, eventually over time they come back and say, I was wrong. I was wrong for doing what I did. It seems that when I watch other people suffer lifelong consequences because their ego had to be right, it hit me on such a powerful level that I don't want to be controlled by my ego. So I really appreciate your question, because I think I don't really get asked a lot about myself personally from it, but that is what resonates with me when I see there's a line in the Judeo-Christian Bible that says, there, but for the grace of God go I. And I really like that statement, because it's like, how can I say that I would have said or done anything differently if I was someone else? How can I say I would have done anything differently? Now, our ego wants to say, well, I wouldn't have done that because I had things tough and I didn't do that. But you only do it for your own perspective, your own lens. If I was someone else, how could I possibly know what I would have done differently? So I think for me, I've learned to set my ego aside and wipe away judgment for other people. And I can approach people with tremendous compassion. And it doesn't mean that there aren't consequences, because of course there are consequences for actions. But once you set firm boundaries, you can really give people a lot of love and compassion and be easy on them. But I think the main lesson, I guess, I learned from working with others was that I didn't want to be controlled by my ego. I wanted to live by my authentic, true self.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And I appreciate it that you touched on how interconnected we all are, both in your TED talk that I heard and right now, too. We really impact one another. So the next question is, have you ever sat across from someone in pain and thought, there's no answer to this, but I'm staying anyway? What happened in those moments?
So I do that a lot. I really do that a lot. I don't think, maybe when I was younger, I wanted to give people answers. I'm 51. I've been doing this therapy for 27 years. I don't try to give anybody any answers. That's all I do is sit with people. When I was young, if somebody would have told me, well, you don't understand what I'm going through, my ego would have been like, well, I do understand. But honestly, if someone tells me I don't understand now, I say, you're right. How could I possibly understand? How could anybody truly understand someone else? I don't think it's possible. I think our ego wants to declare we understand everything, or we understand what someone's going through. We understand our own experience. For instance, we've all had sadness, we've all had loss, we've all had desire, and we can understand those core principles. But to purport to believe that we can absolutely understand what everyone's going through, I don't think that's real. So I often simply sit with people and I say, like, I can think of one story in particular. A young man, his father was murdered, and I spoke with him the next day. And I say spoke with him, but the truth was, his mother brought him in to a counseling office, and instead of sitting across from him, I went and just sat down next to him on the couch. And I said, my man, there are no words, but I'm here with you. He was 15 at the time. And there was a horrible, unfortunate accident 10 years later where he passed away in a car accident. But up until that time, we remained close. And now, every now and then, he would talk about how that first day that we met, we didn't talk. Like, I just went and sat next to him on the couch. I don't think we said two words the whole time. And I told him, you don't have to say anything. I just want you to know I'm here with you. I really believe that's what I do with people is I can sit there with you. Compassion really means to share the load. So I like to use metaphors, but think about a big log. If somebody's carrying a heavy log, what I can do is I can come over and I can help lighten the load. I can carry it with them. What my hope is, in most times, is to show people they don't even have to be carrying it. Sometimes people are carrying something they don't need to be carrying. For example, if you're angry with someone for mistreating you, you holding on to that anger keeps that mistreatment alive. And learning to forgive is your way of freeing yourself so that you don't have to carry that log. Now, that doesn't mean, and I think when people are in pain, they might take that to mean, well, I'm just supposed to forget everything. And I don't mean that at all. Like, setting firm boundaries is really important. If someone hurt you and they're not in your life, forgiving them doesn't mean, oh, I'll just welcome them back in my life and let them do whatever. I don't mean that. I think you should set firm boundaries. But forgiving them is often for yourself at first, to free yourself from the burden of having to carry around so much anger. It's so heavy. Grudges are so heavy to have to carry. And I hate for people to feel like they have to carry those grudges, because they don't.
Yeah, thank you. And how do you help someone who feels both too much and never enough, especially when logic fails and the nervous system won't settle?
Well, I think it's really common where people, let me use the phrase feel too much in the first sense that I hear it, which is a lot of people, they feel very strongly for the pain that they see in others. And when they feel that, they're actually taking on that pain. And the truth is, that is overwhelming, and that does happen. So in the 1990s, Italian neuroscientists discovered what I think is one of the most important discoveries in history, which were mirror neurons. Here's what happened. They were studying this monkey, and his brain was hooked up. And what they would do is, let's say they put car keys. If he would reach for the keys, a specific set of neurons would fire. If they put peanuts and he reached for the peanuts, same motion, same spot, a different set of neurons would fire. If they put a banana there, a different set of neurons would fire. What they found was that there were different neurons for everything. And then one day at lunch, maybe when all good research really happens, but at lunch one day, the monkey's brain was still hooked up, but he was sitting perfectly still. And one of the researchers grabbed for a bag of peanuts for himself. And when he did, the other researcher, by luck or divine timing, not only happened to be looking at the monitor, but also happened to, of all the neurons they classified, recognize that the neurons for peanuts went off in the monkey's brain. So in other words, what they discovered in that moment was, even though the monkey wasn't moving, his brain, he was reaching for those peanuts in his brain. And they discovered what they call mirror neurons. And mirror neurons, they're primarily located in what's called the premotor cortex. So if I raised my hand, anybody watching, if this is a visual, if you're seeing this in a visual way, if I raise my hand in your brain, your neurons for raising your hand just went off. So you did this in your own mind, but your motor neurons didn't fire. So if I raise my hand, you don't have to raise your hand back, but in your brain, you're doing it. So This is the reason why I always tell parents, if your children play sports, have them watch the best in their sport, because when they're watching that person perform, in their brain they're performing, and it is the root of vicarious learning. They are also the roots of empathy. Now here's why this matters so much and why I brought this up. When you see people suffering, in your brain you're also suffering, and these mirror neurons are going off. So for many people, if you have a lot of mirror neurons, you're probably feeling an awful lot when you see others suffer. So you're quite literally taking on that suffering. And it's the reason why there's something called secondary trauma. Many therapists get secondary trauma because when they're listening to the suffering and pain of others, their brain is actually experiencing it. I do a lot of work in maximum security prisons. And what I teach the staff is this: as you're going around throughout your day, you're seeing people incarcerated. Whether or not you believe they should be there or not doesn't make a difference neurologically. To your brain sees someone trapped, and your brain experiences feeling trapped. And so it's a difficult job just because you're seeing a lot of suffering going on all day long. And if you don't have outlets, if you don't have ways to get it out or laugh and have humor, then your brain is taking on that trauma. And that's why it's called secondary trauma. But what we've learned is neurologically, just because you're listening to it doesn't mean you're not, or watching it doesn't mean you're not experiencing it. I'll give you an example. There was a veteran who he came up to me after a talk, and he said, there was a man in my unit, and he didn't go into the field with us. The only job he did was take radio calls all day long. And he got disability. And my unit, we were mad at him because we were like, why did he get disability? He didn't even go out in the field with us. But when you just explained what you explained about mirror neurons, it hit me that his brain was hearing every horrible call come in, all the suffering he was taking on, and it was impacting him for real. And he said, now I feel bad that I judged him. Now I feel bad that I didn't have empathy for him, because I understand what you're teaching. So look, one of the reasons why I like to teach this concept is it does help people who feel too much to understand why they're feeling so much. They're taking on the suffering that they're seeing. And if that's the case, if someone listening is taking on the suffering that they're listening to or seeing, then I want to remind you to take care of yourself. Make sure you're talking to somebody to get out some of those things, because if you're holding it all inside, it's going to impact you. That's part one. Part two, amplify the joy in your life. Like whatever brings you joy, do more of that, because I don't believe we're in this incarnation just to deal with suffering. Like we're here to experience it all. And that means joy as well. And I think the more we amplify our joy, that's a really wonderful part of being a human being, is to find what brings you joy and get to experience that. So for those who feel too much, this is what I would offer. And I think that leads to the second part of when you're talking about being overwhelmed. Sometimes people are overwhelmed because they're taking it on. And picking up that log, helping someone carry that log, I want to remind you that even though I'm going to sit with somebody and I'm going to help them carry that load, when I walk away, I'm also setting the log down. Whether or not that person chooses to set the log down or not is up to them. But my job, if I go around carry everybody's log, I'm going to be burned out in a week and I'm never going to be able to help anybody. So I had to learn how to set the log down when I walk away. I can give people my best when I'm with them. And I try to give people the gift of presence and be fully present with people when I'm with them. But when I walk away, I'm not still carrying that. That's not either healthy or helpful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for being so thorough with for people who feel too much, that's some of the specific resources they could go to help them cope with that. And the next question is, what's the line between needing someone and losing yourself in that need? Can intimacy coexist with fear of abandonment?
Fear of abandonment can actually lead to rage. There are different types of rage or anger people feel. So, for instance, somebody might be listening and they say, well, I don't have rage, but I have anger. However you want to phrase it, a fear of abandonment can really impact anger. And here's what happens. First of all, I think we're learning more and more with quantum physics and with neuroscience that what we think about, we contribute to there being more of. So if you are afraid of something and you keep thinking about it over and over again, you're creating that thing. You're making that thing. You're bringing that into the reality of your mind, when the truth is fear is if there's something, if a bear is running full speed at you, fear serves you well. Fear says, like my amygdala, send a message to my adrenal glands, get my body up, and I'm going to either fight, flee, or freeze. Fear serves us well. But if I'm just sitting here and you and I are having a conversation and I'm in a closed house and you're in a closed house and we start thinking about bears and we get real fear, that's an anxiety. That's not real fear. The bear's not going to come in the house. So what happens is we create the concept of a bear charging at us in our mind. It's a mental picture. And then we develop real feelings of fear around it. That's the bad news. The good news is if we can create the image of something or give something our attention and that creates it, then we can also choose to focus on something else and create that as well. So what we focus on, we amplify, we make it bigger. What if we could learn to focus on what we want, not on what we don't want? And I see so many people focus on the fear and they think about it over and over again. They're giving it energy. But what we feed is what survives. What we don't feed doesn't survive. And that's true mentally as well. So if we don't feed thoughts of fear and we simply change our focus of attention from the thing we're afraid of to whatever we really want, the more we think about the things we do want, the better chance we have that. Think about health. If you constantly are afraid of being sick, you literally weaken your immune system and you are significantly more likely to be sick. But if you think thoughts of health and strength and you think about how miraculous your body is and how it is so strong and so healthy, then you are quite literal. This isn't figurative, this is literal. Then you are less likely to get sick, like a common cold, if your mindset is, I'm very strong. So the power of our minds is absolutely phenomenal. And when our minds can concentrate on what we want, not on what we don't, we bring ourselves a tremendous level of peace, joy, happiness. It is really a trick to learn to focus on what we want. Now, it is so much easier said than done. And if someone's struggling and they're listening right now, they say, oh, that's easy to say, it's too hard to do. I want to validate that it is much easier to say than to do, of course, but it is possible. It is possible to train your brain to focus on what you want, not on what you don't. It takes effort, but it is possible. And anyone can do it. Literally anyone can do it. Sometimes someone, if they're really struggling with anxiety right now, they say, no, I can never do it. I can't just get rid of my thoughts. And if they're thinking that, I'm not saying just get rid of it. I'm saying actively focus on what you want. So here's the neuroscience behind it. If your brain can't ignore something, that's wonderful to learn. But the other thing that's really wonderful to learn is we don't multitask. This is like really great to learn. The human brain doesn't multitask. And someone could be sitting there listening to this right now and eating popcorn, and they're going, well, I'm multitasking. But what happens is your brain actually switches focus incredibly rapidly. So when you're driving and talking, your brain is shifting. Ta, 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 ta. It's doing it in microseconds. All right, so why does this matter? Well, it matters because if we don't multitask and our brain can't just ignore things, then we take that information and we say, the more you focus on what you want, the more you're going to strengthen the connection to see what you want. If you walk through this world, this is a great exercise. Literally everyone listening can do. If you look for kindness tomorrow and you say to yourself, people are really good and there's going to be kindness everywhere today, I promise you, you will see kindness everywhere. If you look to say things are terrible, you're going to see that too. So I want to give you two things. One, I want to give a little teaching tale. I'm super grateful you found my work. I'm thankful you watched YouTube and stuff. You probably noticed that I teach in parables and stories. I love to teach in stories. Have you noticed that about the stories? So here's a good story. There's a stranger and he's walking into a new town and he sees a monk coming outside of the town. And this stranger has a bunch of belongings with him. And he said, oh, I'm moving into this new town. So he talks to the monk. He said, what kind of town is this? And he said, what are the people like? And the monk said, well, what were the people like in your last town? And he said, the people were scumbags. They were thieves. They were criminals. And the monk said, that's exactly the kind of people you're going to see. Well, he goes off into the town. Then a little bit later, as the monk's walking along, another stranger with a bunch of all his belongings comes up to him and he says, hey, I'm moving into that town. The same one the other guy said. He said, what kind of people are in this town? And the monk said, what kind of people were in your last town? And he said, oh, they were the nicest people. The neighbors were so kind. People always looked to help others. It was a wonderful town. And the monk said, that's exactly the type of town you're going to find. In each person, what you look for is what you're going to find. So that's maybe a life lesson through a teaching tale. Now I want to give you the neuroscience behind it. If you define your luck as bad luck, well, there was a study done where the researchers asked the people, they're going to look through this paper and they're going to pick the number. It's like a newspaper. And the job was to count the number of pictures that they could find. So before the study started, they had people define themselves as, are you a lucky person or are you an unlucky person? Well, the people, so when they started to count the pictures, on one of the pages in big, huge letters, it said, there are 42 pictures in this page. You can stop counting now. The people who defined their luck as having good luck, they closed the paper, said there's 42 pictures. Boom, they got it. For the people in the same study, looking at the same paper, for the people who defined their luck as bad luck, they did not see the sign that said that. They kept counting the pictures and they even ended up with the wrong numbers at the end. When you say that you're bad, you have bad luck or that you're unlucky, you are literally missing opportunities that are right in front of you. But when you can define your luck as good luck. So I put a video on my YouTube channel and I said, with my luck. And I tell the story about how when we say, well, with my luck, most people tend to say something negative after that. Well, with my luck, it figures it'd rain. Well, not me. With my luck, I say that all the time when I see anything good. Well, with my luck, it would be sunny today. Well, with my luck, it would be nice. And so I always associate the phrase with my luck with something positive. And it is a game changer. Let me tell you, I've done this with clients and people throughout the years. And the people who undertake it and actually do it, they have changed their lives. And the people who refuse to do it will try it like one time. And when everything doesn't work out perfectly for them, they say, see, I had bad luck. And they choose to define themselves as bad luck. The problem with that is you're making yourself a helpless victim. You're making yourself a puppet. And you don't have to be. Like, you really don't have to be. So I hope that's helpful for people who are listening. If you take nothing else from this, start saying with my luck anytime something good happens to you, and watch the difference in your life.
Yeah, no, that was very helpful. And I appreciate how thorough your responses are to each and every one of these questions. So the next question is, when someone's been told their sensitivity is a weakness, how do you help them reclaim it as a gift or a strength?
If someone's been told that their sensitivity is a weakness, I think what the person, so people see our actions, not our intentions. We judge other people by their actions, we judge ourselves by our intentions. When someone sees that sensitivity is a weakness, it could come from two different ways. So first, I'm always looking to learn. When anytime someone gives, if I put myself behind someone's eyes, I always look to learn. What is it that I'm doing? What am I showing the world that they would perceive that? So maybe the person means it because I'm not setting clear boundaries in my life. Maybe for example, if someone is sad about something and then maybe they lost their cat, and then now I start being sad about them losing their cat, and now I can't perform my duties or I can't be there for others because someone else lost their cat. That might be less about being sensitive and more about, I see the attention they're getting for their sadness, so I want to show sadness, so I'm getting attention. That's one thing we could think about. Maybe it's something else. Maybe someone's being a jerk and they say, you're too sensitive, because they're afraid of looking inward at their own sensitivity. And so a lot of times we see in others what we don't want to face in ourselves. So it's possible that they're saying it because they're afraid to go deeply and touch and talk about emotional issues. If someone came to me and they said, someone told me I'm too sensitive, first thing I would say is, what do you think? Do you find that you're too sensitive? Is it the whole mirror neuron thing that we just talked about? Maybe you're taking on all this suffering. And here's the thing about taking on that suffering. It makes sense neurologically why you're taking on that suffering. But if you're taking it on unnecessarily, for example, there are people who they see being a victim as a trophy or a badge of honor. So if someone tells something that they did that they went through that was difficult, I went through an abusive relationship. Well, the person who sees being a victim as a badge of trophy might say, well, I was through an abusive relationship that was worse than what you're talking about. And they almost want to amplify their being hurt. And the reason why I think that's not healthy for people is anytime that other people are in control of us, I don't think that's the healthy spot to be. So I don't want to be known for anything for my ego. I would rather want to be known for what's in my true self. And I believe people's true self is incredibly stronger. Like, people can't, I specialize in working with people convicted of violent crimes. I work with people who are victims of violent crimes. Being victimized is very real, but I am very mindful never to call someone a victim, because I wouldn't want that label on anyone. I feel like you are stronger than any situation that ever happened to you. So I think if someone told me that someone told them they're too sensitive, I would want to learn more about it. But they were in the back of my mind, since I always focus on what can be done, not on what can't be done, and I can only work with the person in front of me. So a lot of times people come to me and they say, well, this is what my ex is like. And I will validate how they feel and I'll acknowledge whatever they're talking about, but I'm not going to spend the time I have with them talking about how the ex should change and all the things the ex should do differently, because the ex isn't even in the room. So what would it matter? Even if we came up with the best solution in the world for what other people can do, if they're not in the room, it doesn't matter. So instead, I would only focus on the person in front of me and say, what can you do about the way you perceive your ex, about the power you give your ex over your mental state? What can you do to free yourself from that? And if they said to me, well, they tell me I'm too sensitive. Well, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Always focus, from my perspective, focus on what can be done from the present moment forward, and always focus on the only person who has unrestricted, unfiltered access to your mind, which is you. And the more you can talk about what you can do differently, well, that changes things. Let me just give a little bit of a tangent here. This morning, I was on a radio show and they asked me about violence. And they talked about all this violence and there's political violence and all this stuff. And if people don't believe the same thing that you believe, they feel licensed to just throw all this anger toward you. And what I was saying on that show, which I would like to communicate here as well, is this. We think that violence and anger is somewhere else out there. It's these other people. But the reality is that every time you contribute to that violence by, maybe you have your own anger targets. Maybe you pick somebody in your mind who's an anger target and you don't like that person. So you feel free to say terrible things about that person. And I don't think that's right. I think the more each of us can find peace within our own minds, the more we're going to contribute peace to society. The more we think, well, my way of thinking is correct and anybody who thinks differently from me is wrong and bad, then the more we're going to contribute violence to the world. So I think it's really important for us to first and foremost look inward.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure if that's helpful or not for that question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for all of that. Very insightful. Next question. What's your definition of real strength, quote unquote, real strength? And how can men especially stop performing toughness and start embodying emotional courage?
Well, I just wrote a book called Strong Mind, Strong Man. I'd love to get people interested in this book, Strong Mind, Strong Man. And it is about real strength. So real strength, from my perspective, is being able to have self-control. So what I see as weakness and insecurity is people trying to control others. So if we're talking about it with men specifically, when men try to control other people, when they say, you should think this way, you should feel this way, you should do what I say, that's trying to control others. And to me, that's weakness, that's insecurity. When you have real strength, you're able to control the only person over whom you have control, yourself. So I don't need people to think the way I think. I don't need people to believe what I believe. I'm a practicing Zen Buddhist. Other people may say that's wrong. You're wrong or bad. That's fine. Like it works for me. Like it's okay with me if somebody thinks that's a bunch of hoopla. It's okay with me if somebody thinks whatever they think. I'm okay with it. I don't need anyone else on the planet to identify or believe what I believe. And I'm not trying to convince anyone else to believe what I believe. I have no desire to convince anybody or convert anybody to my way of thinking. Conversely, I'm not going to be converted to anybody's way of thinking unless they say something and it resonates with me. And if it resonates with me, cool, I'll be happy to change my thought on it. But I think that I have found true strength in that because I'm not trying to, I don't need anybody, I don't need to control anyone else. And I think that's where real strength comes in. It takes practice and effort. And the other part of real strength is being able to identify what is your ego versus what's your essence, to be able to identify your ego and then challenge it. So here's something that's kind of cool. We can be skeptical of other people. That's easy. It's easy to be skeptical of people who think differently, believe differently. Oh boy, we can be skeptical of them all day. So I go all over and I speak thousands of people. And I always ask at the beginning of my talks, how many of you believe, honestly, that you still have more to learn? 100% of the hands go up. I have more to learn. So I say to people, if you really believe you have more to learn, why is it that the moment someone disagrees with you, do you hurry up and seek to defend your perspective? Why do you try to prove anyone wrong? If you really believe you have more to learn and someone sees the world differently from you, why not say, cool, teach me what you're seeing? Maybe I'm not seeing something. Like, if you really have true strength, you're not trying to control others. You're trying to seek to understand within. There's a really cool, this biologist studied the wolves in Yellowstone. This is so cool. So they noticed that this one wolf was like the alpha wolf. Like, he was a bad dude. He never lost a fight. And what they noticed in this wolf, they had not seen before. So this wolf, not only would he give his belly so that his wolves could jump up, and the baby wolves could jump up and pretend they were winning, but cubs that weren't even his own cubs, he would stay on his back and let them jump on and pretend they were winning. And they dubbed him the super wolf, because this wolf was so secure with himself that he had nothing left to prove, nothing left to prove. That was the super wolf. That to me is a true alpha. And an alpha can be male or female, but an alpha has nothing left to prove to others, does not need to be convinced to think a certain way, and won't be convinced to think a certain way, and doesn't need anyone else to think his way. It just is what it is. And I think, to me, if people are interested in learning how you can have real strength like that, well, that's why I wrote this book, Strong Mind, Strong Man, because I see a need for young men to be able to look up to people who aren't just the tough in the gym. Like, that's wonderful. That's great to be physically strong. But if you can bench press 500 pounds, but you get mad in traffic if somebody cuts you off, that's not real strength. Real strength is to be able to control what's on the inside.
Yeah, well said. And that book sounds fascinating. Strong Mind, Strong Men, right? It's called.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I was proud of this one. I'm really happy with the way it came out. It is I think I mean, I made it really easy to read, so that way young men in particular, but you don't have to just be a young man, but definitely. And there's been some women who have read it recently, and they've written to me and they said, well, this can apply to us too. And I agree. I'm working on a new book for everyone. I just wanted to do this one for young men because I thought young men really need, at this point, someone to look up to that isn't just about physical strength. Physical strength is wonderful. It's great. We're body, mind, and spirit beings. And I think we need to train all aspects of ourselves, our body, our mind, and our spirit.
Yeah, well said. So people have to check that out. So the next question is, what is the third way between exploding in anger or suppressing it? Can you describe what healthy anger looks like in real time?
There is a word that we use called assertiveness. And assertiveness is being able to say what you want to say, and you have a right to say what you want to say. You have a right. You know, do you remember the movie Dirty Dancing? Back in
Um,
the day, I'm Generation X, so I'm a little older. There
it's
was a
been a
movie,
minute.
Yeah, it's been a long time. There was a movie with Patrick Swayze called Dirty Dancing, and I'm dating myself, A, and B, I'm laughing because this is the movie I'm choosing to cite in this moment. But this line came to me from that movie where he's teaching this young girl how to dance, and he says, "This is my dance space, and that is your dance space," or whatever. I can't believe this is what I'm quoting on a podcast, but I am. So this is your space, this is my space. The point is, like in martial arts, when you're like, this is my space, it's like if in this space right here is my space. If someone like my dad would say, wasn't to start a fight, but if someone threatened me, that I can defend myself, and that's a pretty healthy thing to say. If someone's threatening to hurt you, you can defend yourself. So a fight doesn't have to start when I don't have to wait till someone punches me. When they have intent to hurt me and they come within that space, I can defend myself. And the reason why I say that is this: we have a right to this space around us to be safe. Everyone has a right to be safe. And assertiveness helps us define what that line is. So let's say I'm not comfortable with someone hugging me. When someone comes up, maybe they're very comfortable with it. Maybe they say, well, come hug me. It's great. No, but, oh, don't worry about it. But maybe I'm not comfortable with it at all. But how could this person possibly know this unless I say it? If I don't say it, if I don't show an indication that I'm not comfortable, how could they possibly be expected to know? And if they hug me, I can't be upset with them because they didn't know. I want to be, and I don't want to wait until I'm angry. Maybe they start hugging me and I say, I don't want anyone to hug. No, I have to be assertive. So I might say to them, you know what? How about if we just shake hands? I'm not super comfortable with hugging, but I'd love to give you a handshake. So that way I'm assertive. I'm saying what I want to say. I'm setting my boundaries. And what happens is when people don't set boundaries and then they get mad at people who cross their lines, that's when they get aggressive and angry, but they didn't choose to set the boundaries in the first place. So this is why you have to be proactive about your mental health, about interacting with others. You're free to set whatever boundaries you want to set. But if you don't set the boundaries, it's unrealistic to be angry with other people when they cross that line. Let me give you an example. There was a man I was working with who just got out of prison, and he's in his own space, in his own apartment. He had been locked up for 10 years. So this is really the first time. He was about 31, 32. This is the first time as an adult because he spent his whole 20s incarcerated. So he's in his apartment and he was getting so upset with people because they didn't know to take off their shoes. They didn't know to use the towels on the left side of the sink, not the right side of the sink. He made up so many rules, but he found himself getting really angry because people didn't know his rules. So I said, you've made up these rules in your mind. The shoes should be on the left when people come in, not the right. But you don't even tell people these rules, and then you get mad at them when they break it. So I did a couple things with him. The first thing I said was, why don't you write down all your rules? Let's make sticky notes. So I had a sticky notes. Let's just make sticky notes of all your rules. So first of all, we did that. And then I wanted him to see how many rules he actually came up with. It was a ridiculous amount of rules. And I said, now imagine you put these up all over your apartment. And these are where the shoes go. This is where the towel goes. This is where this goes. And he said, well, I don't want my apartment to have all those sticky notes all over it. And I said, I don't think you want your mind to have this many sticky notes in it because as long as you're creating these rules, people are going to break them. And then he would get so angry if someone broke it. So I said, I think this is where we get into what I call the difference between the cartoon world and the real world. And if I could reach into everyone who is listening, if I could reach into your heart, this is the part I would give you. The cartoon world is our world of shoulds. People should think, feel, believe, and behave the way I think they should. And then there's the real world, how people actually think, feel, believe, or behave. So my cartoon world says, you should believe what I believe. People should be nice to each other. Okay, that's a nice cartoon world thought, because the real world, people are not always nice to each other. People shouldn't cut me off in traffic. Cartoon world thought, because the real world is people do cut you off in traffic. So here's the thing, your cartoon world can be logical, it can make sense, but if it's not reality, it's not reality. So I spent the most of 27 years teaching people how to align their expectations with reality. So if I say, man, people should think what I think about politics, boy, do I get upset when someone thinks differently. But if I say, wait a minute, people think differently, that's okay. Now I realize it's not the end of the world if someone doesn't think exactly the way I think. But the problem is most people get so caught up in their cartoon world that they start to think, well, because I believe it so strongly, this is how the world should be. And it's not reality. And that's where I find most people suffer, because they demand that the world should be in their cartoon world. And I call it a cartoon. First of all, I didn't come up with the world of shoulds. Karen Horney, a neo-Freudian in the 1950s, called it the tyranny of the should. Like, should is a tyrant. Albert Ellis in the late 50s said, don't should all over yourself. All I did is I call it the cartoon world. And I call it a cartoon world because it's as fictitious as a cartoon. A cartoon is not real. The cartoon world is not real. The real world is what's actually happened. The real world is the world as it is. So if everyone listening could understand, you have a cartoon world. I have a cartoon world. I still have a cartoon world. The difference is I know how to call myself on it. Instead of being just skeptical of other people, I'm skeptical of my own ego. So if I think that person should have done that, then I go, wait a minute, they didn't do it. So that's a cartoon world thought. So I can't be mad. Again, so coming back to the question about assertiveness and how do people, before they get so angry or turn it inward on themselves, they've got to learn to set boundaries. Instead of saying everybody should do this, be clear about your boundaries. I think you're going to find that you won't have to go to the extreme of being aggressive or so upset with yourself because you didn't say anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. So communicate clearly, have boundaries, and then knowing the difference between reality and how we would like things to be, in our how we've been conditioned and programmed, aka cartoon world, right?
Yes. So I don't say, I also think it would be a cartoon world thought to say you should never use the word should. So I also believe that there are some shoulds that make sense. Like, I should go to work. Okay, great. That's a should. Fine. I should eat healthily. Great. That's a great should. But what happens with the cartoon world is the word should becomes a demand. And moreover, it's most often a demand on someone else. So you should not chew with your mouth open, right? I'm demanding you to be different than how you are. You should think what I want you to think. That's a demand. That's a cartoon world thought. You should act the way I want you to act. That's a cartoon world, because that's a demand on someone else versus hey, it's a good idea for me to be at work on time. I should be on time to work today. Does that make sense? So that's kind of how I phrase the difference of that.
Yeah, that does make sense. And sometimes people have a lot of shoulds laid upon themselves as well. That may be causing some pressure. So, with the next question, you've worked in prisons, as we've mentioned multiple times, boardroom, schools, homes, various different environments. What do you see repeating everywhere, but no one wants to name?
Well, I had a similar question asked last week about a concept that I hear myself teaching constantly that I don't want to keep talking about, but I just can't stop talking about it. And to be honest, it's the cartoon world. It's everywhere. The cartoon world is everywhere because people are so, they believe your cartoon world is logical. It makes sense. Well, people should think the way I do. Great, that makes sense. But it's not real because people don't. So if someone does think differently, then that's just not real. That's the concept that I think is the most important to help people find peace. And so here's what happens people will say then, because it's natural to go from one extreme to another. Carl Jung called it enantiodromia, big word, but what he meant is people have a tendency to go from one extreme to the other. So if, let's say, a person is struggling with anger and they're listening to this, they say, oh, so we shouldn't tell people to do anything. So nobody should ever do anything. Well, that's not what I'm saying at all. That's an extreme. But what I am saying is this: instead of demanding that other people should be a certain way, what if you actually met them where they were? So instead of me saying you should think differently, I seek to learn, how do you think? One thing led to the next in the story of everyone's life. So, what led to you thinking what you're thinking? And then, if I listen, not with the intent to change your thoughts, but with the intent to really learn what you're seeing, a couple things are going to happen. If I'm authentic and I'm genuine and I'm listening to learn, not listening so you can be done talking and now I tell you how to think. If I'm truly listening to learn, you're going to sense that authenticity and you're going to be less defensive and you're going to be more receptive to what I have to say. But the problem with it is this: let's say somebody who's listening is a salesman and they say, well, I can take these techniques and sell people a bunch of stuff. Well, you won't. And here's why: because this isn't about getting the other person. Like when you seek truth, you're not trying to get over on somebody. You're not trying to win somebody to your side. Like if you're really seeking truth and you're seeking it from your essence, your true self, that part of you that's in the middle of that iceberg, if you're seeking it from that spot, then you have no desire to be right. You have no desire to be the one with all the answers. Instead, you only want truth. And when you really seek truth, it's a different ballgame. It's not about getting over on anyone. It's about understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Thank you. Oh, next, what's the hidden violence in being nice, quote unquote nice? How can politeness become a weapon that avoids truth?
That's a really great question. I think it would probably be along the lines of not setting boundaries and then demanding that people understand those boundaries. So if I'm nice, maybe I just allow you to do and say whatever you want. But secretly, I do have boundaries. So now I'm going to gaslight you because you're not doing what I think you should be doing in my cartoon world. So I'm going to say, and then I get to sit back and be the helpless victim and say, well, I was just being nice. That can lead to violence. I can tell you that that is definitely a recipe for violence where you're not being authentic about being nice. Some people are nice as a weapon, as a way to control someone else. And then when someone calls them on that, they play the helpless victim. Well, all I was doing was being nice, and that's not what was happening. They were acting a certain way to control the other person. I see that a lot, actually. I see that a lot, where someone says, you know, you can maybe they say, well, you use the car whenever you want. And then one day they're really upset that the person's been using their car so much. But they told them they can use it whenever they want. They never said there were any restrictions or anything. And in fact, when the person said, hey, maybe I shouldn't use it so much, they say, no, you use it. And then they use it, and then they go tell their other friend, well, I can't believe they're taking advantage of me. And now they get really upset. They're like, what are you talking about? And that can lead to anger and violence because there are false expectations. So I think, and obviously, this is a great question, but it's a general question. So there are so many myriad of different ways that we could answer this, or person that we're thinking about for it. Like you might be thinking of one type of person. I'm thinking about a guy who was really upset with his mom because the mom said he could use the car whenever. And then she was really mad because she was like, he uses the car all the time. And he's sitting there going, she told me I could use it whenever, So she's like, but I didn't mean that. And I was like, well, did you tell him that? And she's like, no. So how was he supposed to know? So it really depends. And then, so if you're being nice, but you really don't want to be doing what you're doing, that's not nice. That's not having the assertiveness to set clear boundaries. So I would say it's important for you to work on setting clear boundaries.
Yeah, that seems quite important, seeing as that we've circled back to a couple times, right?
It's so important. Setting boundaries is really, really important. And it's so difficult for people to do. It's difficult for parents to do. And as parents don't set boundaries, then at some point they know it's too far. So they try to create them. So, for example, I was a teacher at a high school and then a professor. And I was blessed because my mom was a teacher and my mom taught me, make sure you're incredibly strict at first because then you could always ease up if you want. But it is so hard to create rules once everybody's already established that you don't have rules. And I was so thankful to my mom for that advice because that really worked throughout my whole career. I always was very structured with what I wanted and demanded. And then it was always easier later the semester if I decided to give in here or there. But I didn't have to hustle and create boundaries later on. I made those boundaries clear from the start. So yeah, it is an important concept. And it does come, you know why? Because I mean, I deal with a lot of anger. And people are really angry when others cross their boundaries. But what they don't understand is they're not telling people what their boundaries are. So there's no reason why anyone should know your boundaries. People see your actions, not your intentions. So if you're not telling people your boundaries, you can't be mad when someone crosses them because it's no different than that guy who spent 10 years in prison and made up a bunch of arbitrary rules in his apartment and got mad when people broke his rules. I mean, it's easy for people to see. Like, I think it would be easy for you to understand this and everyone listening to understand this. This man was mad if you put your shoes on the left side or whatever. I can't remember which one it was a long time ago, but on the left side was okay, but putting them on the right side wasn't. And there's no way anybody could have known that because it was his own personal preference based off a cellmate that he had back in prison. Isn't that, I mean, like and he literally got mad at people if they didn't know.
Yeah, we all have a version of our story of the left, she was on the left side versus the right side, right? The equivalent of.
Yes. Yes, we do. That's exactly it.
So with the next question, what's the spiritual cost of constantly trying to earn your worth? And how can someone begin to unlearn that hunger to be enough?
Well, the idea that we're not enough is all ego. It's all ego. So the spiritual cost is exhaustion. Like you constantly think, I'm not enough. I'm not this. I. But all that I is ego. The true self, the essence, that divinity within. As I said, I practice Buddhism. There's a wonderful line from Jesus from the Judeo-Christian tradition or the Christian tradition where Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is within. And if you look at some of the major religions, like most major religions have some semblance of that teaching, that there is this divinity within. And especially within Buddhism, like the idea of like, if this finger is talking to this finger and he's like, oh, we're so different. Oh, look, we're so different. And then one day they find out, oh, we're all in the same hand, or it's all the same stuff. Uh, so that divinity within, that doesn't have to wonder if it's enough. It quite literally is the divinity. So what wonders if it's enough? The ego. The ego wants to know, am I enough? What do I need to do more of or less of? But the true self, that essence of who we are, it's perfect as it is. And so it's not about being anything different except your own very nature.
Yeah, thank you. Very well said. So you've taught others to regulate, to breathe, to respond, not react. So when your own system is overwhelmed, what anchors you back into yourself?
Maybe the most freeing thing that I've been blessed to share with the world. I noticed it early in my career, and I've been so thankful that I've been blessed to see this. But our mind always wants to match our body. So when you're hungry, that comes from your hypothalamus, which is in the middle of your limbic system, which is your emotional system. So when you're hungry, your brain is in the middle of its emotional center. So when you're agitated, when you're irritable, when you're short with people because you're hungry, it's because you're literally in the middle of your emotional center. And here's what happens. Your body feels agitated, so your mind races to make up a story to match your body. And your mind says, well, I must be agitated because of you. It's what you said earlier. It's what you did earlier. It's because of you. And it's not. It's that your mind, your body's hungry. So the greatest wisdom that I've ever been blessed to encounter, teach, share with the world is that your mind always wants to match your body. So what do I practice? Same thing. My wife and I, we are been married 25 years. We're happier now than we've ever been. We practice this all the time. Like if I was really agitated and irritable, I wouldn't snap at her. I would say, you know what? You look like a piece of pizza to me. So let me eat something and then we can talk. And she'd do the same thing. And she'd do the same thing. She'd say, so sometimes couples stay up at night fighting. My wife would say, you know what? I'm really tired and my mind is trying to make up a story. So I'm going to go to bed. And this is a practice that seems small. It's enormous. It's a game-changing practice. There's an old wives' tale that says, never go to bed angry. It's a beautiful sentiment. It's a nice idea. Unfortunately, I work in the real world where there's violence and people who are overly tired stay up and have domestic violence. I can't tell you through decades of work how many guys have come to me and said, literally, that advice saved me from going back to prison. Like me and my girl were arguing, and I said, Dr. Conte says we need to sleep first. If we're angry, we can keep fighting tomorrow. And we go to bed and we wake up in the morning and we looked at each other and we're like, what were we fighting about? I don't know. Because we're both overly tired. Your mind wants to match your body. And it is not easy, but once you understand it, once you really get it, not just here, but here, it'll change your life. Like your life will literally be different. You'll be like, what was that podcast I was listening to? It changed my life forever. That's the advice. When you can understand that just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean you have to react or respond to it. You don't. You absolutely do not.
Thank you. It's so simple, but like I said, like what you just said, not just intellectualizing it, but feeling it and
Yes.
practicing it too, and knowing it to really be true.
So it's such a difference.
Yeah. Last question with just a minute left. If every title fell away, doctor, counselor, professional speaker, who would you be underneath it all? Oh, who are you underneath of it all? And what would love still ask of you?
What would what still ask of me?
Love.
Love. Well, I mean, I think my role in this world is to be a light for people. So that's what I try to be. I try to be a light for people. It's not about titles or anything else. I will say, if there's any title that I am most proud of, it's father. Being a father is the greatest thing in my life. Our daughter's just the light of the world. Thank you.
I
Yeah,
want to
that's
be
it.
able to say thank you so much for this very insightful interview.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you.